Some people would look at this box and say, yep, that's a box of Intercessor Space Marines. But those people don't know what they're talking about, because when I look at this box, all I see is a kill team. One of the greatest feelings in all of wargaming is cracking open a new box of plastic crack. I have enjoyed the spit out of running Space Marines and Kill Team. In fact, some of the most fun I've ever had is playing with the original Compendium rules. Now, I haven't been playing that team anymore because there's much better options available now. Now the Kill Team is turning the ripe old age of 3, there is the Intercession Kill Team. Basically Assault Intercessors and regular Intercessors with some much needed updated rules, which is exactly what I have planned for today. Now, I've got these guys prepped and ready to go, bare bones, no heads and arms yet, because I want to make a fun, flavorful, not very try-hard group of Space Marines. Maybe one day I'll put together a try-hard team, but for right now, I just want to put some chain swords through some orc heads. And speaking of fun and flavorful, today's sponsor, Greytide Studio, is going to make that really easy. Greytide Studios has been hard at work creating some of the best miniature upgrade bits I've ever seen, and their latest offering, the Primal Hounds, is absolutely jaw-dropping, featuring 300 new incredibly detailed bits. What makes these bits different is they are designed to fit perfectly alongside the most popular wargaming miniatures. You can easily outfit your entire army with perfect bits, whether those models are Intercessors, Phobos, Gravis, Terminator, or even Dreadnoughts. With the Primal Hounds bits, you can easily accessorize to your heart's content without having to do any cutting or sanding. These bits fit right in and will turn each and every miniature into a masterpiece dripping with personality. And as if 300 bits aren't enough, anyone who gets the Primal Hounds will then have the option of picking up Greytide's previous bits pack, the Eternal Pilgrims, for a discount. All of these bits are available as STLs, and if you don't have a 3D printer yourself, don't worry. Greytide has you covered. They have pledges offering the Primal Hounds bits physically, so there is nothing stopping you from picking up the pack. Pun intended. Follow the link in the description below to check out the campaign for yourself, and if you do, use our code EonsPrimalPledge23 to get a discount. This is a box of Assault Intercessors, unfortunately without jump packs. Hopefully, Games Workshop will fix this in the near future. But there are some wonderful poses in this box. As a Black Templar player, I appreciate close combat more than standing back and shooting. I think Space Wolves and Black Templar would really get along. I added the weapon options I wanted on this team. The Plasma Pistol and Chainsword are the top competitive choices for an Intercessor Sergeant. So I glued on a Hand Flamer and Power Fist. Rule of cool, baby! And speaking of Power Fist, I love this Greytide Studio Power Fist. I changed the angle slightly by sanding down the edge, and now I have a gap. Green stuff to the rescue. I put a little banana-shaped piece of putty into this armpit and sculpted on the ribbing. Then I splashed out as many interesting bits as I possibly could, and of course, some shoulder pads. I put green stuff under the shoulder pads, and I often put green stuff under Games Workshop shoulder pads too, so I can get them exactly how I want them. Now for the greatest bit I have ever seen in my entire life, Dick Tusks. These let you know he is large and in charge. A few more bits to spice up the mini, and a very cool head and backpack, and this sucker is ready for war. Oh my goodness, that was so much fun. It's like playing Barbie dress up. Now this guy is almost unrecognizable as a bog standard Intercessor Sergeant. And I got 5 more of these suckers to do. The next operative I focused on was the Assault Grenadier. This guy can chuck free grenades everywhere before he rushes in, swinging his chainsword into the enemies of mankind. I love this wolf head shoulder pad, and for the second one I decided on a plain shoulder pad. I need a little room for decals later. I decided this guy would be the wolfiest guy, with a wolf shoulder pad, wolf backpack, and wolf face mask. He's a real charmer. In an Intercession Kill Team, I can take 2 grenade guys, and this guy has the underbarrel grenade launcher, able to fire a grenade before he fires his Holy Bolter, getting to take 2 shots each activation. For him, I decided on a plain helmet, but there's still something lovable about it. I built up his friend, another Intercessor, and although this guy is just a plain warrior, splashing out with the Auspex and some other equipment, he can do some serious work for the Kill Team. Now for the Assault Intercessor Warriors, the reason I wanted to play this team. I love close combat and Kill Team, and these guys will be running around bullying my opponent, letting the shootier operatives chip away wounds while these guys run in and finish them off in blessed close combat. These guys are looking absolutely rad. Oh, I love the Space Wolves. I just want to keep collecting Space Marine Kill Teams until I've experienced every single flavor and color of Space Marine out there. And speaking of colors, these guys are gonna be a little tricky to paint because they are very, very detail heavy, but I think I have a plan for how to make it a little easier on myself. I started off with a black primer. I love priming over mismatched bits because it turns something that looks more like a toy into a real life Warhammer guy. I sprayed a little dark blue over the black. I want a hint of blue in my undercoat, and then a classic Zenithal. I love a good Zenny Prime. It's a really good representation of value, and of course, it's best friends with Optimus Prime. Now these guys are very detail heavy, but I think if I can get a really good blue armor, keeping my lights and my darks, I can actually get away with not painting every single detail. I can emphasize the things that I want and I can kind of just ignore all the things I don't. And if it all works out, it should all look finished. I took a blue, watered down with some water and a little bit of matte medium, which makes the paint transparent. Then I can blast this on without covering up my Zenithal Prime. Light baby blue is an interesting color for the ultra aggressive Viking army, but it makes for some nice bright Marines. The Zenithal gave me nice highlights, but I still want some crisp shadows and outlining. I mixed Agrax Earthshade with Lamian Medium to thin it down, and then I globbed this on over everything. Space Wolves are on the dirtier side of Marine, so a brown wash will look more appropriate than a black wash. I am in love with the color I just created. It's not quite what I wanted, but it's like blue-green with a little bit of brown in the recesses. A little Formula P3 Trollblood base with 50/50 Agrax Earthshade and Lamian Medium. I'm gonna save that one for later. I took some of my original blue color, mixed in some white paint, and gave every model a heavy dry brushing. This will bring my boys back to blue without getting the color into the recess shading I just did with the wash. I also used a little bit of this through the airbrush to brighten things up a little more. I want to get this armor perfect, as it's 80% of the model. Now I've got these guys' armor singing, and now it is time for everything else on these fellas. And they're pretty intimidating, but I think by assembly line painted, just pick one thing, knock it out on all of them, it'll be pretty easy. And I think I want to start with the yellow, because after that yellow, these are going to be feeling really Space Wolves-y. Yellow is a tricky color to paint. A lot of yellow paints have very poor coverage. One thing I like to do is mix yellow with a little gray paint to give it better coverage. It still took about 3 coats to get a nice crisp yellow. I wet blended in a white-yellow mix to get highlights going, and for shade, I used an orange wash. This lets me darken the yellow while keeping everything really saturated with color. I much prefer this to darkening with brown. Brown and yellow makes me think too much of bananas. Now for the red. I made up a dark red and put this over the other shoulder pads, carefully painting around all the little details on the wolfy bits and highlighting these up to pure red with some wet blending just like I did the yellow. With just the shoulder pads finished, these fellows really feel like Space Wolves. And now for my favorite part, decals. I found some great decals like this one that's meant for dreadnoughts and it fit perfectly on the Grenadier. And these triangles add a festive atmosphere to the gun-toting Marine. After I got some matte medium over the decals, I sponged on some of the original shoulder pad color to add a little bit of battle damage and make the decals look more realistic. Now in terms of assembly line painting, order of operation is really important to be very efficient. And I think I might have made a slight mistake painting the shoulder pads first instead of all of the little tidbits on top of the shoulder pads. But I think I can fix it with a little bit of dry brushing. I like to work fast, and carefully base coating all these little ropes and fur decorations doesn't sound like a fun time to me. So dry brushing will catch on all these raised details without leaving too much paint behind on the large flat surfaces. I also used a small dry brush to help. I started with an earth brown base coat on all these parts and then switched to a tan to brighten them up. Speed paint over the fur made these areas a lovely brown, and then some white highlights here and there on the ropes to make them look extra crispy. Now that the brown decorations are done, it's time for the gold. I think I can get away with the exact same technique, dry brushing, with an even smaller dry brush this time. I rubbed gold into all the decorations, covering up the blue but leaving behind the wash paint. Now for all those weapons, and my new favorite weapon tool, Rattling Grime. A black contrast paint with just a little bit of brown in it. I put this over the weapons, letting some of the Zenithal primer show through, and then a dry brushing of silver. This gives me the best of both worlds, non-metallic metal and true metallic metal, and it's super quick. Quick enough to give me time to do some fancy freehanding. I painted some triangles on the gunner and stripes on the chainswords. A little bit of freehanding goes a long way to making the models even better than they originally were. Now I'm just dreaming about doing a Space Wolves army. These guys are so much fun. Simple blue base coat, but then you get to do whatever you want. Accent colors of yellow, red, white, black. There's a lot of really cool flavor in Space Wolves. And they're about 90, maybe 95% done. The only thing left is the thing I have been putting off, and that is the faces. I keep trying to get fancy with faces, and sometimes I nail it, and sometimes it's a mess. So I'm just gonna go with the tried and true base coat wash highlight. A light beige red over a Santa Claus-esque face, and then a wash with Cadian flesh tone. And then a few layers of my original beige red mixed with white, painting on some highlights until I get all the way up to white, focusing on his forehead, cheeks, and brow. And speaking of white, and speaking of Santa, I painted his hair and beard white. Then I painted the eyes, and the eyes took longer to paint than the heads. There was a lot of getting it almost perfect, and then screwing it up and starting over. These guys are beautiful! Almost as beautiful as the terrain available on our Patreon. Over there, we have a new STL terrain pack every single month. This month we have the Gothic Administratum, a grimdark cathedral that can be assembled intact or destroyed. Now, you've probably noticed that I don't have bases on these guys. I haven't built them yet, and the reason is I want to try something that I've never done before, a little UV cure resin. I want these space wolves trekking across a frozen blue glacier. I started on the leader's base. He needs to be a little taller to show dominance, so I put some cork under his feet. And then I primed the base in black. To make the rocks look a little more realistic, I dry brushed them with gray, and then I sprayed turquoise over the flat base. Now, for the moment of truth. I put masking tape over the edge of the base rim so there'd be some depth I could pour the resin into without it just pouring off the sides. I poured the resin into a cup and stirred in some turquoise ink. This stirring made a lot of bubbles that didn't seem to want to go away, but I decided to just go for it. Pouring it in, and this stuff is thick. It did not want to settle. I had to fuss with it a lot to get it into all the nooks and crannies. All right, well, I have my UV cure flashlight. Let's see what happens. I let the resin cure for 10 minutes, which is 5 minutes longer than the packaging suggests. I really wanted it to work, and it sort of did, but really it didn't. I think I made several mistakes. This tape really isn't good enough to make a seal. I went a little bit too thick, and the ink that I put in there made it a little bit too opaque and the light couldn't actually get inside and cure everything. But I have another idea. This stuff is so gel-like, I don't think it's gonna run off the side of the base. I put on a nice dollop and then smoothed it around with a toothpick. This had the added benefit of no stirring, so no bubbles. And the turquoise underneath did a good job of making the resin appear blue. I cured this under the lamp for another 10 minutes and this worked like a charm. Now I have a glass-like finish on these bases and it's time for the secret sauce, snow. I really like Army Painter's snow. It makes for lovely, crunchy white snow. And I like to mix in a little bit of crushed glass. This adds a little bit of sparkle. Then enough gloss medium to get it to a toothpaste-like consistency. Then I took the oldest, rattiest brush I have and globbed this on, making some nice piles and spreading it out and making sure to get some on the feet and legs. I covered up a lot of the ice, but this somewhat transparent snow on top of the transparent resin makes for some very realistic looking Ice Age bases. You know what? Painting these guys up has really made me realize something. Kill Team is the reason I love Warhammer 40k so much. I have a big scoop of nostalgia for 40k, playing so much of it in high school, but Kill Team has given me the perfect excuse to try everything Warhammer has to offer. I painted Orcs, Kroot, Death Guard, Adeptus Mechanicus, Astra Militarum, different flavors of Space Marines, and now Space Wolves, and I really like Space Wolves. I got to experience painting and modeling them, and now I'm gonna get to try them out on the tabletop. Big thanks to Grey Tide Studios for making this kit bash super easy, and now I'm on a bit of a Space Marine kick. Let me know in the comments below what Space Marine chapter I should build next.